Right. It is good to see everyone here this morning, and just excited about Christmas season and being with friends and family. Before I forget, if you're here with your family and you would like to, Jenna Drain, who's one of our college students, is set up out that direction toward the parking lot. And so if you want to grab a family photograph, she's going to take your picture and then upload them all to Facebook. And they'll be there for you to grab off of Facebook if you want to. So if you're here and you got your family with you, or even if not all of them are here, and you want to, you can stop over there and get a picture, and she'll do that for you. She's a great photographer. Okay, so in Matthew chapter 2, that's where I want you to go. And let me tell you where we've been and kind of where we're headed to this morning and tonight. So we started off talking about just the whole Christmas story, which, you know, when you go through that every single year, sometimes it's like, God, what do I do? You know, where do I head with it this year? And so just asking the question about how God guides us, because as you look through the Christmas story, as you look at Mary and you look at Joseph and you look at the wise men and you look at the shepherds out in the fields at night, there's this flurry of activity as God is leading all of these different people and groups of people to get them where he wants them to go and to get them there when he wants them to be there. And so just started this whole series asking the question, how does God lead us? I mean, how does God show us where we're supposed to go and get us there when he wants us to be there? You know, how does he do that? And so when you look at Mary, I think what's true about Mary is that she had a willing heart. Because if you remember when the angel came to her and said, Mary, you're going to be with child, and he's going to be this great guy, and you're going to name him Jesus, her response to that was, whatever you want, God. You know, I'm the Lord's servant, so let it be to me as he has said. So there was this willingness in her heart to just go and to do and to be whatever God wanted for her, and God led her. Last week we talked about Joseph, and it wasn't that Joseph wasn't willing. I just think that it was a little bit different with him in the way that God led him. Because with Joseph, if you remember, he'd already made up his mind. I'm divorcing her. I'm not going to marry her. You know, I don't know whose kid this is, and I just don't get all this that's going on. And so for him, it wasn't a question of should I or should I not divorce her. It was really a question of was it going to be a public divorce or a private divorce. He'd already made up his mind. And so the angel came to him and said, hey, Joseph, kind of like the direction you're headed, what you're thinking, this is not what we want. God wants you to bring Mary home as your wife. And so I'm asking you to do something you really don't want to do. And to his credit, what he did was he obeyed God. And as he obeyed God, God led him in the direction that he was supposed to go. I need you to go to Egypt to save the child's life, and he did. Now I need you to come back from Egypt. I need you to resettle here in Nazareth. So it'll be a fulfillment of prophecy. And Joseph did that. So it was out of obedience that God led Joseph. So what about the wise men? You know, the Magi, the three kings, whatever name you want to give them. But these guys that came to worship Jesus and give him gifts and to find this one who was born King of the Jews. So I think for them, really, it's really about seeking God. Because they were over in Babylon, more than likely, we know that they were from the east, so they were there, and this supernatural type of star shows up, and they realize, and this is pretty cool too, they realize that this is the prophecy, a fulfillment of the prophecy of this king that was to be born of the Jews. They didn't know a lot, but they knew that much. Even they weren't even Israelites, they were in another land, and they see this star, and they remember this prophecy about this king that was to be born of the Jews. And so they travel there to find this one who has been born king. And so for every one of these people, God led them through different ways. And so the wise men are who we're going to be looking at this morning. And really, it's about looking and it's about seeking. And when you do that, God takes your searching and your seeking, and he uses that to direct your steps. You know, it was a number of years ago, my older son and I were out hunting deer, and there was this deer, and I said, let's get out of the blind, and we're going to sneak up on him. So anyway, there was some cactus between me and my son. So he shoots at this deer, and I don't know if he hit it or if he didn't hit it. So we go off looking for this thing through the brush in South Texas. And it was probably 10 plus years ago, one of those flip phones, you know, that you hang on your belt right here. And it was held on by Velcro. Well, mesquite bushes and South Texas and dragging yourself through all this rough country, it doesn't bode well. So I lost my phone. We looked, and we never found the phone. You know, 10 years ago, when you lost your phone, it really wasn't that big of a loss, because you might not be able to make a call. You may not be able to receive a call, and you may lose some contacts, but really that was about it 10, 15 years ago when you lost your phone. But that's not the case today, is it? So a couple of weeks ago, what happened is I lost my iPhone. And you talk about your life being tied up in an item. Our lives are tied up in these phones. It's not just that you can't take a call or to send a call to somebody or lose some contacts there. I mean, our lives are in there. I mean, we've got credit cards in there. We've got birthdays. We've got Social Security. We've got all kinds of stuff in there. So I said, I've got to find this phone. And I started looking for this phone, and I look in all of the obvious places. I look in my clothes, and I look in my house, and I look in my truck, and I'd come home from church, and I look at the church, and I can't find it anywhere. I'm calling it. Of course, I had it on silent because I was at church and didn't want it ringing, while I was preaching. And so I can't hear it ring. I don't know where it is, but I have this vague reminder that when I got into my truck, I heard a buzz. And I don't know, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Still couldn't find it. Called my daughter because we're find a friend on iPhone. And so it can, like, by GPS, you know where your phone is. I'm like, Taylor, tell me where my phone is. So she looks me up on her phone, and it's at the house. So that was a good sign. And so my son and I, we're hunting the house, and he's texting, and I hear this buzzing noise going on. 10 or 15 texts later, we finally isolated it to a particular room, and then in a particular pocket of a jacket that I had already looked in, but then it hadn't looked well enough. But I found my phone. So here's the thing about us losing things and us searching for things. When you lose something that you really don't care about, how hard do you look? I mean, you might, just because you should, make a cursory look, like I'm going to look for it, but I'm not going to look very long, and I'm not going to look very hard because I really don't. It's just not that important to me. And so you might look for a little while, but then at some point you're like, I'm done. I'm not looking for this thing anymore. It's not that important. I'll go buy another. I have another one. I can live without it. Those are the excuses that kind of go through our mind. But then, when you lose something that your life is tied up in, when you lose something that is critically important to you and that you value and that is going to create problems in your life if you don't find it, you look. And when you don't find it, you look some more. And when you don't find it, you call your daughter in Dallas and say, hey, I need your GPS right now because we got to find this. And when you can't find it, you get your kids to help you find it. And you get them all in the same room, and we're listening for the buzz and identifying, kind of isolating where this noise is coming from, because you're going to look until it is found. That's how important it is to you. That's how valuable it is that you discover where this thing is. So Jesus tells a couple of parables, okay? And it's in Luke chapter 15. I'm just going to tell you what they are. The first parable has to do with a guy. He had 100 sheep. Now, I know we don't have sheep. Maybe some of you do, one or two. They're out in the barn, and you're going to show them next year. But that's about the extent of the sheep that we've got. So this guy's got 100 sheep, and one of them gets lost. I don't know. Maybe he left him behind. He ran off. He's still going to drink water. I don't know. But he leaves the 99 sheep out in the open pasture, and he goes and he searches for this one sheep until he finds it. And Jesus says when this guy finds that lost sheep, he's excited about it. I mean, he's so excited, he calls his friends, he calls his family, he puts it into a sermon and tells everybody how he found his phone. I mean, he wants everybody to know that he has found his lost sheep because it was important to him. It was something that was valuable to him. And then he tells this other parable about this lady who had lost, a coin. Now, I don't know what she was thinking in the middle of the night because it was dark. But she gets up in the middle of the night and realizes, man, I only got 10. I've only got 9, and I had 10 coins. And so she lights a lamp, just kind of puts some light in the house. She's got the kids out of bed. She's got her husband up. She's tearing up the house. They're doing spring cleaning in the middle of December because she says, listen, I got to find this coin. I'm going to rip this house apart until I find it, because it was important to her. It was something that she valued. So when we move into this area of our relationship with God and this question about how God leads us, maybe you've got a question that you need answered. Maybe you need a direction for God to just say, look, go this way, not that way. Or maybe it's just like, just don't do this, just anything but that. But you need something from him that is in the area of guidance and leadership and understanding and wisdom and knowledge of his will. And so when you get to that point, if it is important enough to you, if you value it enough, then what's going to happen is that you're going to tear the house apart looking for it. You're going to leave the 99, whatever else you were doing, you've got going on in your life, whatever else you think is important, all of a sudden, all of those things pale in comparison to the idea that I got to find out what this is that God has for me. And so that's something of the idea of the Magi. You know, we think that these guys didn't have families and they didn't have jobs and they didn't have anything else going on back in the East. But when they saw this star come up, they're like, pack it up. Man, get the camels. Come on, get them. Let's load it up. Let's get the gold. Let's get the frankincense. Let's get the myrrh. I don't know how long it is to Israel from Babylon, but it's more than a day's journey. So let's just stop everything we're doing and let's figure out what's going on with that star. Let's figure out who exactly is this King of the Jews that has been born over there. And they end everything that's happening in their life so that they might find this one who has been declared the Christ. So here's the story in Matthew chapter 2. It says, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. And when King Herod heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him in Bethlehem of Judea. So they knew where the Christ was to be born. The Magi, even though they weren't Hebrews, they understood the prophecy that there was this king who was going to be born, the King of the Jews. And then it says that Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. And after listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. You know, there's some people that try and explain away this whole idea of the star, that it was Halley's Comet, or it was some alignment of planets and the stars and the constellations, but none of that fits. The only thing that fits is a supernatural event of God. Because these guys were astrologers. That's what they did. They sat outside every night and they looked up at the stars and they just studied all of the stars. And all of a sudden, this one shows up that had never been there before. And they're like, oh, that's interesting. And they connect the prophecy. Actually, there's a prophecy in the Old Testament about a star arising out of Jacob. They connect the prophecy of this king of the Jews and the star that was to arise out of Jacob or Israel. And they follow this star. And they go to Herod and they ask, you know, exactly what town. And when they leave Herod, this star actually goes before them and stands still over the top of the house where the child was. And so it was a supernatural event of God. And it says, in going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and they worshiped him. And then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, because Herod wanted to kill the child, they departed to their own country by another way. And so seeking God is one of those elements that's foundational to the Christian faith. It's foundational for us to understand his wisdom, for us to understand his knowledge, for us to have a grasp a little bit of what the mind of Christ is, and for us to have an idea of what it is that God wants us to do in the places that he wants us to go. And so here's the essence of seeking God. It is pursuing what you cannot see, but you know exists. That's what seeking God is all about. It's pursuing the one that you cannot see, but that you know exists. You know, as people, we do that all the time, don't we? We pursue things that we know exist, but we can't see them. Why does anybody pursue a woman? Or why does anybody pursue a guy? Why does anybody pursue a family? We know that families, and the idea in our mind, we know we have this idea of what a family is and that it exists. We have this idea of love, and we know that it exists, but we can't see those things. But yet we pursue those things. And so we can't see God. He's not here tangible with us, but we have evidence that God is alive and that he is real and that he does exist. And in fact, what you find out is that God has left this evidence for us that we might seek him. The evidence is here for us to look at it and go, you know what? There has to be a God. And if there is a God, then I want to pursue him that I might discover who he is. Listen to these two passages of Scripture, and they work together. In Romans chapter 1, it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men." Now, and then he explains why the wrath of God is coming. It says, "Who by their unrighteousness they suppress the truth." So what truth was it that we suppress by our unrighteousness? And then he tells us, he says, "For what can be known about God is plain to us." So we're able to know some things about God even before salvation. He says, "Because God has shown it to us. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and his divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world." And here's how you see his power and even his divine nature. He says, "In the things that have been made, so that we are without excuse." So that through creation, God is speaking, listen, I exist. And because we see his existence in creation and recognize his power and his divine attributes, then that is what is one of those things that pushes us to seek him. Now listen to what Acts picks up in chapter 17. It says, "And he made," talking about God, he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined the allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek him and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, yet he is not actually far from each of us. In him we live and move and have our being." And so God, through one man, created all the nations that we might seek him, because God is not far from us. Now, sometimes people think, well, God has hidden himself from us. And in some ways, God is a little bit hidden, but he's hidden in the sense that he wants you to find him. So let me give you an example of kind of how that might work out. So guy meets girl. Guy falls in love with girl. Girl falls in love with guy. They're excited about getting married. And he wants to make an impression when he asks her to be his wife. So he sets up this elaborate scavenger hunt, right? So she starts off with this little note saying, "Drive to the place of our first date." And she drives to the place of the first date, and there's this other note that she discovers there that was, quote, hidden, but it was hidden in such a way that she might easily find it, because he's not trying to get her to where she doesn't end up where she's supposed to be. He just wants to make it fun. He wants to find out how interested she is in pursuing the relationship with him. And so she goes and she finds this note, and it leads her to another place, and she goes there and she discovers another note. And finally she ends up where the guy is, and he gets on his knee and he tells her, he says, "I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Would you possibly, maybe, please be my wife for the rest of our lives together?" And she says, "Yes." Now, so he does this whole scavenger hunt and he hides all this stuff along the way. Is he trying to throw her off? No, he's not. He just wants to see how interested she is. He wants to pique her interest in the relationship. And so there are some things when we hear about God and we initially kind of see about God that we're like, well, God has hidden things. Listen, He has, but he hasn't. He's hidden them just to see how interested you are in looking for the clues. Because he's made the clues and put them in such a way for you to discover them, which leads you to a place of a relationship with Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. Creation's a part of that scavenger hunt. The gospel, as it's preached and you hear the good news about Jesus, is another part of that scavenger hunt. You being convicted of your sin and of your need for Jesus is another piece of that scavenger hunt. And then the Spirit of God works and draws you to him, and you enter into that relationship with God, and it is good. So God wants you to seek him. It's an integral part of finding out where your heart is. So what does seeking him look like for us? I think number one, in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, Jesus says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all of these things will be added to you. Now, so what are the things that we worry about? We worry about, am I going to get a boyfriend? Am I going to have kids? Am I going to have a wife? Am I going to have a husband? Am I going to have enough money? Am I going to have stuff? Am I going to have a good job? Am I going to have a retirement? We get worried about so many things in life, but you know what Jesus says? He says, if you'll just seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, then you don't have to worry about anything. And so seeking him is one of those things that we do, that we make a priority in our life. It's the first thing that we do, maybe in the morning, but it's a priority for us each and every day. Secondly is in Psalm 77:2. It says, in the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. You know, there are certainly some times when we're in trouble and we're like on our knees and we're thinking, God, I need you. I need to understand what's happening. I need to get what's going on. I don't understand why these things are happening. But then there's other times in our lives too that we go through trouble and we don't seek God. Maybe we're just weary, physically weary. Maybe we're emotionally weary. Maybe we're just financially weary. We're like, God, I can't do this anymore. Well, he tells you that even in the day of your trouble, when things are tough and they're difficult on you, you continue to look toward him and to seek him. But seeking him has got to be a constant for us. It says in Psalm 105, it says, seek the Lord and his strength. Seek his presence continually. Remember the wondrous works that he has done, his miracles and his judgments that he has uttered. You know, seeking him has got to be something that we're just kind of consumed by. That we wake up in the morning and we're thinking about God. We go to bed at night and we're thinking about him. We spend our day and we're just like, what if and what does God want and how's he leading and what's his will in this? We're just kind of consumed by our thoughts of him. Over in Psalm 119 verse 2, it says, blessed are those who keep his testimonies, who seek him with their whole heart, who also do no wrong but walk in his ways. It's like the guy who had 100 sheep and he realized that one of them was gone. What was he consumed by, the 99? No, he's not consumed by the 99. He's like, I got to get that one because I don't feel complete. I don't feel good. I don't feel right. I can't go back to the 99 knowing that the one is gone. And so I'm just kind of just a little bit bothered by this loss of this one sheep. He was consumed by it. The woman getting up in the middle of the night and waking her kids up and her husband up, turning on all the lights and saying, I can't sleep. This cannot wait until the next morning. I have a coin that's been lost and we've got to find it and we're not sleeping. Nobody's getting any sleep till this thing is found. That's the kind of consumption that we need to have towards Christ. Just a desire for him as Lord. And so how do you do that? You know, how do I consistently just be that way, think that way toward God? I'm slowly working my way through this book. I mentioned it like 3 months ago, and I'm halfway through. But so he made this comment that is great. You have to consistently decide against yourself. That can be applied in so many different ways. But you've got to consistently decide against yourself. If you want to seek God, if you want to be consumed by that, and it's something that you are consistent with in your life, then you have to learn how to decide against you. So let me read some of his words for you, and you'll know more about it. The best decision, he says, that you can make for yourself is making a decision against yourself. You have to discipline yourself to do the right things day in and day out, week in and week out, year in and year out. And if you do, the payoff is far greater than the price that you have paid. Nothing compounds interest like delayed gratification. If you want God's best, you can't just say no to what's wrong, because we think that's the summation of the Christian life. Just say no to what's wrong. He says you have to say no to what is second best. If you want God's best, you have to say no to what is second best. Good is not good enough. He says if you want to get out of debt, you've got to make decisions against yourself financially. It's called sticking to a budget. If you want to get into shape, you've got to make decisions against yourself physically. You've got to join the gym, and then you got to go. If you want to grow spiritually, you've got to make decisions against yourself. So try fasting. What decision against yourself do you need to make? If you have the courage to make it, it'll be the best thing that you have done for yourself. If you don't believe me, ask a world-class athlete or renowned musician. The only way you become great at anything is by making decisions against yourself. Because if we just did what we wanted to do, we wouldn't accomplish much at all. We have to learn to decide against ourselves, and as we do that, we'll be more consistent in our seeking of God. So do you know, this is just kind of interesting about God. God is curious as to whether or not you will pursue him. Listen to this. This is Psalms 53. God looks down. It's like God standing on top. He's just kind of checking us all out. God looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. I think parents do that. You know, we think we got a pretty good idea of, what our kids are going to do. And so we just watch them just to see what decision they're going to make. Are they going to make a good decision or make a bad decision? Are they interested in this or are they not? And I get it. I mean, I know God is all-knowing and omniscient and all-powerful, but I don't know how to explain this dichotomy, this correlation between, our free will and the sovereignty of God and all of things and his knowledge of all things. But it's like God just looks down and just says, I just want to watch. I just want to see who's going to get up and seek me. I just want to see who's going to stop in the middle of the day to pray and say, God, what is it that you would have me to do? I'm just curious to see who's going to say, God, direct my feet. Show me the path that I am to go. Keep me off the bad path. Just curious to see, kind of what response people are going to have. Another thing I thought was interesting is that he rewards those people who diligently seek him. In Jeremiah chapter 29, we quote the first part of this, we forget the last part. So I want you to hear the first and the last part of this. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart, and it will be found by you, declares the Lord. I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I have driven you, declares the Lord. I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you in exile. And so we love that part. We love it. Where God says, I have plans for you, man. Plans for a future, plans for a hope, plans for your welfare. But we don't keep reading. And the rest of the reading of this is that you've got to diligently seek him. And when you diligently seek him and call out to him and turn from the things that you've been doing, then that's when God restores fortunes. That's when God brings people back to the promised land. That's where God begins to work in your life anew. And so seeking him is a prerequisite to the welfare and to the blessing and to the riches and to the goodness of God. So don't get those out of order. You've got to seek him first. And so let's go back to the wise men just for a minute. I have a question. Why did they follow the star? Now, I mean, we're not told, so these are just my thoughts. But why did they follow the star? It was just kind of like, hey, that's kind of curious. Let's see where it leads us. But really, it's not even that, because we know that while they were still in the east, they see the star. There's some level of recognition that that star indicates that a child has been born who is the king of the Jews. So it wasn't that, hey, this is curious. I'm going to follow this star over to Israel and kind of just see, like, the end of the rainbow, what's going to be at the end of that rainbow. It's not how it was. And so they went there. They find here. They're like, hey, you're the leader. You would know if there's a king that's been born. So we're just curious, where's this king that's been born of the Jews? Where's this Christ child that's there? And so here's what I think that the wise men just intuitively knew about this child that was born in Bethlehem. That child was greater than they. They were dignitaries. They were foreign dignitaries from another country. They're coming with gifts. They're coming searching out him, not that child searching them out. Usually it is the lesser who seeks out the greater. Usually it is the lesser who gifts the greater. Usually it is the lesser who worships that who is greater than they. And so they recognize by following the star that that child is greater than they are. With the gifts, the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh, they're lavishing gifts on somebody that they know is greater than them. They fall down in worship of this child. Okay, and again, these guys are not nobody from where they're from. They're somebody of wealth and importance and magnitude, and they are prostrating themselves before this child in Bethlehem, the King of the Jews. They recognize that Jesus is greater than them. Here's what's going to happen when you seek God. Whenever anybody does, whether believer or unbeliever, you seek God out of an honest, sincere heart, authentic heart, you will always be led to Christ. You will always be led to that child. You will always be led to that man who gave his life on Calvary. And you will be posed with the same results, the same questions, the dilemma that the wise men were. How will you respond to him? Will you recognize that he is greater than you and that he deserves all the gifts that you could give and all the worship that you could muster? Because when we recognize who that child is, that's our natural response, to follow him, to fall at his feet, and just to give. It's like, God, I'm so grateful for everything that you have done for me. Here is my life. Here's all my stuff. Here's my family. Just take it, because that's how good he is. So maybe as we leave this morning, there's a question in your mind. God, where do I go? Or maybe, God, I just don't understand. You just need some leadership in your life, some guidance, some understanding of what the Lord is doing. I encourage you to be willing to obey, yes, absolutely, but to seek him. And I know it's busy. I know, Christmas is coming up tomorrow, and we've got church tonight, but carve out some time for you to be alone, get away from kids, get away from spouses, get away from the phone and the computer and all those other things that distract us, and spend some time with him. Pray. And to just tell him, Lord, I'm seeking you, and I pray that you would allow me to find you, because I need understanding. I need an answer. I need some direction right now in my life. And so let's bow our heads and close our eyes. And I want to pray for you. I want to give glory to God.